Most animals don't play into adulthood with a few exceptions. Humans, otters, dolphins, and, of course, dogs.
I could be a mess, stressed in yesterday. He don't care less, he sees me anyway. Yeah, he sees me anyway. My dog thinks I'm great, he thinks I'm number one. He never hates, even when I'm done.
Welcome to Dog Leads with my dad, Steve Bishop. He's a certified dog trainer, has a BA in psychology with a minor in sociology. My dad is a Family Paws parent educator and a member of the Pet Professional Guild. If you have questions or would like to suggest a topic, you can reach him at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com.
This episode is brought to you by Simple Solutions to Common Problems. This presentation, based on the book by the same name, will explain the reasons and solutions to the most often asked about behaviors, including play biting, chewing, jumping on people. The presentation will be on March 18 at Waters Moss in Columbia, Missouri. Advanced registration is required, and a link will be in the description.
I wanted to lighten the mood a little bit, so this episode we're going to talk about play. And as I've talked about before, I'm a big definition person, so when we talk about play, I'm just talking about pleasant arousal, so something that's enjoyed. In recent years, we've moved away from the idea that play is practicing for hunting, and it's now believed that it's preparation for unpredictable situations and to strengthen bonds within your group, and it's its own reward, so it's just fun. However, play does tend to be modified hunting and sexual behavior. So in my group classes, I always have a socialization period at the end of each class, very closely monitored. When I say that, things that I keep an eye on are, is everyone having a good time? So, for example, the class I have right now, there's one dog that's a little bit timid, and she likes to find a place to hide for part of the play session. And we want to allow the dogs to do that, to have a safe place where they can go under a chair, under a couch. My favorite is behind the person, the owner, just somewhere safe so that they can kind of observe, but they're not being forced into this situation that's stressing them out. And things that I look for aside from that are the ears. Are the ears loose? They're not pinned close to the head. They're not really far back. They're not really far forward. You'll see that a little bit when the dogs get into like wrestling matches, but for the most part, the ears are loose and they're floppy. Maybe a little bit alert to pay attention to what's going on, but you're not seeing those really aggressive or submissive postures where the ears are close to the head. I also look at the tail. Is the tail wagging? Is it that nice broad loose wag that shows that they're having fun? Or is it that tight lowered tail that's tucked into that submissive posture? Or are they flagging, which is when the tail is held high but it's not wagging? And then the loose body, they're not stiffening up, they're not going into that alert posture where the whole body's stiff and they're leaning forward, and the ears are usually pricked up and maybe forward a little bit. The other thing you want to look for in appropriate play is what we call a role reversal. So you'll have a dog that's chasing another dog, and then after a period of time, the dog that's doing the chasing will turn around and be the chasee. So we want to see those role reversals. Another good example, when the dogs are wrestling, you have one dog that's on the bottom that may be rolling over, biting and mouthing at each other, but then you'll see them flip and the dog that was on top is now on the bottom. One of my favorite examples, one of my group classes, we were having our socialization period at the end, and I was talking to a couple of the clients about these things and what I was watching for, what I was looking for in the play, make sure everybody was having a good time. And there was a Great Dane, and I can't remember what the other dog was, but it was something really small, like a toy poodle. And they just got along famously. They constantly with each other and playing. And the Dane had the poodle on the ground, and they were just wrestling. There's a lot of play, self-regulating, and I'll get back to that in just a second. But So I wasn't concerned, but I'm explaining all this to him, and I said, you watch this long enough and you're going to see a role reversal. And almost as if on cue, the Dane laid down and this little dog, the toy poodle or whatever, got on top of the Great Dane and was standing there and, going for the neck and whatnot. So those are the types of things that we want to see. It's appropriate play. Everybody gets a turn. Another thing you want to look for is what we call self-regulating. Play inhibition is another term I've heard used. What that means is the bigger dog is going to regulate themselves so they're not overwhelming or overpowering the smaller dog so that the play can continue. So a good example of this, we were watching little Bichon for some friends of ours one time. I don't think the dog was 8 pounds, and she and Duncan just hit it off, and they were playing the whole weekend that we had. Sally was the Bichon's name. The whole weekend, Sally and Duncan were just playing constantly. But because Duncan, who's 40 pounds, was so much bigger than Sally for the play to continue, he would self-regulate. So I have a beautiful picture, I use it in a lot of my presentations, where Sally has a tug toy in her mouth, she's in a play bow, and Duncan is laying down just really calm. And seeing this in real life, Sally was pulling for all she was worth, and Duncan was just kind of sitting there letting her tug on this thing, and every once in a while he'd pull back a little bit, pull her towards him, and then he'd kind of loosen up and let her win, quote unquote. So we want to see that self-regulating behavior, particularly for bigger dogs when they're playing with little dogs. One of the ways you can tell if a dog is getting over aroused is if they will not respond to basic cues. So when I was teaching Pet Manners 1, which were older dogs, at the end of class, when we had that socialization period, after about the third week or so, let the dogs get to playing and doing whatever they wanted to do, and then I would tell everybody, okay, call your dog. I wanted to make sure they get their dog back to them. With my puppy classes, it's a lot tougher to get the dogs to come back to you. So one of the things we will do is just take a treat, get it right in front of their nose, or I'll use a squeaky toy. A lot of times that gets most dogs' attention pretty quickly, just to kind of get them to stop, settle down, catch their breath, and then they can go back to playing. Something else I look for is we want to see it's a pause in the play. Dogs will play for a little bit and then they'll pause and then they'll keep going, and I'll come back to that in just a second also. People have a tendency to just go, and then stop. So with play, it can be really confusing for the dog. The person's just going and going and going and going and going, and then they just stop and they're all done. The dog's like, well, what the heck happened? We got that pause, let's keep going. So with dogs, you see those pauses and you may see an appeasement signal, so a raised paw, rolling over, or some other signal. You might also see what can be called as an adrenaline dump, or at least we think it is. This would be like your shake off. So the dogs they got to calm down for a second, just kind of like when they are wet and they want to shake the water off. Looks the same. And then we might see calming signals during these times, or this would be something like a play bow changes the meaning of a behavior that follows. So basically it's a way of saying everything I am about to do is just in fun and I'm just playing. The calming signal, going back to that's a way of saying the behavior happens, I don't know, bite, and then that calming signal or that appeasement signal, and it's like I didn't mean that to be taken as aggression, I was just playing. The difference is kind of where it falls, but there's also differences in what that behavior looks like. One of the exceptions that I've noticed in my classes, at least, is a lot of the herding breeds, because they have that genetics behind them for herding, they tend to not do the role reversal like a lot of other breeds, and it causes a few problems. You can see that the dogs the one being chased is getting a little stressed and is not enjoying themselves as much as this herding dog that is chasing them around the ring wants to chase, doesn't want to be chased. So we want to kind of keep an eye on that, particularly with our herding breeds playing with other dogs. I read an article a while back, and in my observations I've noticed the same thing. It's what can be defined as breedism. So what that means is you have a group of dogs. The herding dogs are going to play with the herding dogs, and the hounds are going to play with the hounds, and the sight hounds are going to play with the sight hounds, etc. But the reason seems to be that like breeds have similar play styles. And so every once in a while you will see like Duncan was a Brittany and Sally was a Bichon, or the dog I talked about, the Great Dane and the miniature poodle. Sometimes you'll see those mixes, but for the most part, like kind of goes with like. Something we want to be careful of is if the dog is given a choice, they will play with one other dog. So we want to be careful about adding other dogs into the mix. The reason for that is, I was talking about the pauses, two dogs will hit a rhythm, and so they'll pause at the same time, they'll play at the same time. When you add a third dog to the mix, it throws that rhythm off. So you may have one dog, they'll play with another dog, and then once they stop, the third dog comes in, tries to get them to play, and they don't have that time for the shake off or just to catch their breath or anything like that. So we want to be aware of that and make sure all the dogs are having fun. Even in my classes, when I have 4, 5, 6 dogs, I'll notice certain dogs pair up together, so we'll see that rhythm going. And every once in a while, another dog will come in, and it's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I'm not in sync with these dogs, so I'm going to go back over and find somebody else to play with. And then you may have one of those dogs that just, it's like, I'm not having fun. I don't want to do this anymore. And they'll walk away. So I want to make sure they're having fun and they're enjoying themselves, if that's the goal, is to get them out and socialize them and give them that play session. So for people, when you are playing with your dog, you have to keep some of these things in mind. Children playing with dogs, you want to make sure they're older. You want to make sure they're being responsible, they're not hurting the dog. Children, I always say, are erratic and unpredictable, so we want to make sure the child is responsible. We want to make sure they're being actively supervised, so if the dog is getting stressed, if the dog does want to go away and stop the play session, that you're supporting them in that. And the other thing, like I said, if you're playing with the dog, give them those pauses. So when I'm playing with my dogs, for example, I kind of mimic whatever they're doing. So we may be wrestling, or I may be chasing them or whatever. If the dog stops, I instantly stop. If the dog does a play bow, then I kind of crouch down on the floor and maybe I'll do what I consider a play bow, at least to the best of my ability. Just let them know that I'm paying attention and that I'm in sync with them, and I'm going to give them those pauses and let them kind of regulate how the play goes so that they're still enjoying it. And then don't let the play session go too long. Some dogs, they get so focused and they just will go because they are social. They'll keep going as long as you do. A good example of this, we had gone camping one weekend and it was right on a lake, and I had taken Duncan out, and I've mentioned before he loved tennis balls, so I was throwing the tennis ball out into the water and he would swim out and get it and bring it back, and I noticed he was getting a little bit tired, and I was like, okay, we'll just do one more and then we'll go back to the campsite and kind of rest for a little bit. So I threw the ball out, and because he was so focused on this game, he went out there, he got the ball, and as soon as he did, he just started going down, and I could just see the water rushing into his nose and his mouth. And fortunately, I was close enough. It took like 2 steps, and I grabbed him and scooped him up. But he was just exhausted, but he wanted to keep going because I wanted to keep going. And again, it's that human nature, go, 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 go. So be aware of that. Don't let the play session go for too long, and make sure the dog is having fun. Look for that loose body. Look for that attentiveness, the broad tail wags, the ears being loose. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought, something a little bit lighter after some of the more serious topics that we've been talking about lately. We're coming up on 6 months of this podcast. I have a special episode planned for next week, so hopefully we will see you there. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, if you'd like to suggest a topic, leave a comment, or you can email me at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com. And if you'd like more information about me or my training, you can visit my website at bishopsgatetraining.my.canva.site.